Hiya, this is the closeout report for Catalyst Audit Circle, which was a Fund 7 proposal in Improve and Grow Auditability. We fully appreciate the irony of a project about audit closing out quite a long time after it actually finished. But the issue here was that we didn't really budget for the work and time that goes into preparing a final report, and so team members naturally needed to prioritise their paid work. We feel there's a lesson here for proposals in general. If in Catalyst we want good and meaningful final reports, proposals probably need to be encouraged to include a budget line for the work that it takes to produce one. And that's especially true of smaller proposals, for whom it represents a bigger percentage of their overall costs. Now for our actual closeout report. Our project team was George Lovegrove, who had the original idea for the proposal, Stephen Whittenstall, who was the proposal owner, Joe Allen, Phil Koo, Vanessa Cardui, Ron Hill, Torsten Potterbaum, Eric Helms, and Matthias Sieber, with Andre Diamond and Miroslav Raj of Treasury Guild doing the project wallet management, and Megan Whitney doing documentation and minutes. Our budget was $12,700, and the dates the project ran for was between March and June 2022. How we addressed the Improve and Grow Auditability challenge. It wasn't by auditing proposals ourselves, it was by doing the groundwork, hearing and collating community concerns about audit, and doing the background thinking that enables audit to be effective. What we actually did, we built a diverse team with experience, insights, and skills in audit, and took a problem sensing approach, which means going out into our various communities and networks and asking people what the issues are around audit and bringing them back to discuss them. We met fortnightly to discuss audit issues, and a lot of our discussion focused on the processes that were already in place in Catalyst, so monthly reporting, challenge teams, and the state of shared common knowledge about how to monitor and audit and how that could be more widely shared. And finally, we conducted a survey. Where we worked was important because since we were problem sensing, we wanted to reach a wide range of different people and all the different areas of the community. So we did regular town hall slides at Wednesday Town Hall to update people on our work. We ran regular office hours at times that were suited to the Eastern Hemisphere participants. We attended Catalyst coordinator meetings and did a bit of problem sensing there. We ran a Gimbal Apps playground to discuss audit issues and an after town hall. We put updates regularly in the Catalyst Weekly newsletter. We shared recordings of our meetings and summaries of our meetings on our Git book, and also as videos on YouTube. And we promoted discussion of audit issues in the audit channel in the Community Governance Oversight Discord. We also shared updates on Twitter, Telegram and Discord, and even idea scale DMs to reach proposers that we weren't otherwise reaching. And we had a lot of one-to-one conversations across the ecosystem. It is important, we feel, to recognise that as part of what we call work. What we produced out of the project included 6 regular meetings, videoed and summarised, and 2 surveys. The first one was internal to IOG, and although we planned it and decided on the questions, we didn't have the time or capacity to complete it, unfortunately. And the second, which was external and went to funded proposers via a Google form. Let's look at our meetings first. They took place every 2 weeks and were documented and shared via Gitbook and on YouTube. And we discussed issues that we'd uncovered in our problem sensing across the community, such as our proposers feeling scared of reporting. We'd heard from some proposers that they were feeling really worried about it, so we tried to work out why and how it could be improved. What common knowledge do we have as a community about how to monitor and audit, and how can we share that common knowledge more widely and equitably? Is there any audit at all happening in Catalyst yet? At the time our proposal was running in summer 2022, several people were saying that there wasn't any audit at all happening. The question of should challenge teams monitor projects came up, and there were some questions raised about whether they should. How can we audit different kinds of proposals appropriately? We heard often that different types of proposals need different approaches to audit, and we tried to explore how we could make sure that all different kinds of proposals are audited in ways that suit what they're doing. What's the right balance between transparency and confidentiality and privacy, particularly around proposers' intellectual property and around any personal data that they might hold from their participants or their users? An example in a bit more detail of problem sensing that we did around proposal reporting. First of all, we heard that proposers feel confused and uneasy about the frequent unexplained changes to the monthly reporting form. We were hearing that proposers were feeling that from one month to the next, they didn't know what was going to be on the form, so they couldn't really prepare to do their monthly reporting, and they didn't understand why the changes had been made, and there'd been no consultation. They also sometimes had no clear sense of why certain things on the monthly reporting form were being asked at all. We also heard that many proposers didn't feel clear on what information to give, and they wanted guidance that was appropriate to their type of project. So again, it's this issue of one size doesn't fit all, and people want guidance that suits what they're actually doing and the kind of audit that they need to do. Some proposers saw reporting as just a tick box exercise. They felt that the information collated didn't actually lead anywhere, but just stayed locked up in a report that no one really looked at. They felt that the information that was given didn't actually increase transparency about proposals and didn't really help to track a project's progress. So the question was raised, what is it actually for? Reporting might never be fun. It's not going to be anybody's favourite occupation, but we did feel that it could be made actually useful to proposers rather than just useful to auditors. And so it wouldn't be just a chore, but would actually serve some of proposers' needs. Some of the suggestions that we found about how that could happen, people felt that reporting could be used to help proposers with marketing, their own internal progress reporting, soliciting helpful advice or even partnerships. And monthly reports could do this by calling out blockers, asking for solutions from others, looking for collaborations, and sensing problems. Obviously, that would only work if the information in a report was not locked up, but was easy to access and interact with. Another suggestion that came up was some kind of report fest on a regular basis to surface key insights from reporting. And although that would take quite a lot of organising, it was an idea that we heard more than once. Another idea that we heard a couple of times was the suggestion of additional bonuses to incentivise excellent reporting. Obviously, that raises the question of what we mean by excellent, but it is an interesting idea. Now moving on to our surveys. We'd planned to deliver, first of all, an internal survey, which would have been via a videoed meeting with IOG, because at present it's IOG who manage any audit that does take place in Catalyst. And secondly, an external survey, which went to funded proposers via a Google form, because they're the people who are being audited. Unfortunately, we just didn't have the capacity to arrange the meeting with IOG for the internal survey, but we did write the questions. They included, What's the process at IOG for deciding any changes to the questions that appear on the monthly reporting form? And secondly, why is there no community consultation on that? Another question was, is monthly reporting intended as a form of audit? Because we were hearing quite a lot that people didn't think it really worked as audit. So if it wasn't intended that way, what was its intended aim? Another question was, so far, how many proposals have actually defaulted, as in taken the money and run? And is it a big problem? We wanted to ask that because we were hearing some people saying that they felt it was a huge problem, and others saying that they didn't think it was happening very much at all. They felt that perhaps proposals were facing barriers in completing their projects or in producing a final report, but they hadn't actually defaulted. So obviously it's IOG who have the data on that, so we wanted to know how big of a problem it really is. Another question was, should high budget proposals have different reporting obligations from low budget ones? This is something that we'd heard quite a lot in the community, and we wanted to know what IOG's take on it was. And we also wanted to hear what IOG's perspective is on the question of audit of process versus audit of outcomes. These are two possibilities that there's often a debate about in the Catalyst community. Should proposals be auditing their process and how they work, or should they be auditing their outcomes, or maybe a bit of both or something in between? So we were interested to hear what IOG's take on this was. And for the full list of questions that we plan to ask, you can see our written report. Now for the external survey. We had 47 responses, which is pretty good for an unincentivized Catalyst survey, but it's obviously not enough to draw any real statistical conclusions. So our aim was exploratory rather than definitive. We saw it as a provocation for further community discussion, which we really hope takes place. We started from the premise that audit begins with data. If people don't collect monitoring data to show how their proposal is going, there's nothing to audit. So we focused on how proposers are collecting and storing data to monitor their proposal's progress. Here are some insights and recommendations that we derived from the survey. First of all, we feel it would be really useful to develop a shared audit vocabulary in Catalyst. In the survey, we saw respondents using terms like audit, monitoring, outputs, outcomes, impact in really different ways. Obviously, it's difficult to discuss something if you don't have a shared vocabulary to do it with. So developing that shared vocab would be a really useful step to promote discussion of audit in Catalyst. Secondly, we'd recommend finding out how widespread the dread of reporting that we'd identified in our problem sensing really is. It didn't appear much in the survey, but we'd still like to find out a little bit more about it and how proposers are feeling about reporting, monitoring, and audit. We wanted to raise the issue of whether auditors, whoever they are in the future, could be more like a critical friend to a proposer. But we recognise that there are difficulties with that, and sometimes separating the role of a supporter of a proposer, a friend of a proposer, somebody who's giving advice and help, is a really different role from somebody who's auditing. So maybe those roles should be separated. Another insight from the survey is that we want to raise awareness that it's okay, or even probably something good, for a proposal to rethink its reporting metrics during the course of the project. In the survey, we saw several people saying that they'd started off planning to monitor one thing, and then as a result of the work that they were doing, they realised that they needed to monitor something else. But they felt that maybe this would be frowned on, or they didn't know if they could do it. So it does seem that it's a good thing for a proposer's reporting to respond to the work that they're doing and to what they're discovering. So it should be raised awareness throughout Catalyst that it is something that is considered okay to do. Another insight that we wanted to raise as a result of the survey is that it's important to remember it's not all about the numbers, and we should beware of counting things merely because they're countable. There's two things packed into that. First of all, it's not all about the numbers because qualitative audit is just as important as quantitative, and we saw in the survey that proposers are doing both, but sometimes felt a little bit unsure about how to do some of the qualitative monitoring that they wanted to do. Secondly, the question of counting things merely because they're countable. We saw some instances where people were counting things because they were easy to count, but thinking that that counting proved things that it didn't prove. A silly example would be, which wasn't a real example, but just to explain what we're talking about, would be if a proposal said, we want to monitor how happy our proposal team is, and we're doing that by counting Twitter retweets. Now, obviously, the one doesn't prove the other, but we did see, even though that's quite a silly example, we did see some real examples of people counting things and thinking it proved things that it didn't actually show. Leading on from that, as an insight from the survey, we'd recommend holding peer-led community workshops on some of these issues. We're saying peer-led and not IOG-led because we think that the process of devising them and sharing them and working together would build the audit community within Catalyst. And subjects that we think would be really useful. First of all, how to create an effective monitoring metric, whether it's quantitative or qualitative, that shows what you actually think it shows, so thereby working against the issue that we raised above about counting things just because they're countable and not really thinking about what they prove. Another one would be practical approaches to evidencing impact and outcomes. We're not saying here that we think that all proposals should be monitoring and evidencing their impact or their outcomes. It's not appropriate for some types of proposals at all. But we note that in the Catalyst community and in Cardano at large, we often talk about how Cardano is changing the world and how it's having an impact on the world. So if at least some proposals don't start evidencing the impact and the outcomes that they're having, then to the outside world, these claims of changing the world are just going to look like rhetoric. So it is probably important for at least some proposers to start thinking about how to evidence their impact. However, we saw in the survey a lot of confusion and unease about how to do this, and a lot of confusion about how it would actually be possible. So in this, we felt that it could be useful to use insights from the arts and the third sector, fields where evidencing impact is absolutely standard and happens pretty much with every project. So there's an awful lot of insight and skill and knowledge that Catalyst could draw on from those fields to help us learn how to evidence our impact in effective ways. So once people in Catalyst are a bit more confident on different ways of monitoring and the range of different things that you can monitor, we felt that there needs to be a broad community conversation on what proposers should be monitoring, whether it's outcomes, impact, outputs, processes, or all of these. Because in the survey, we saw different proposers doing all of these, and it seems like it's something that we should explore further as a community because there was no definite agreement on what people should monitor. We also felt it would be useful to explore how proposers store and share their proposal data, and to consider what data they should share, particularly considering issues around privacy, data protection, and intellectual property. Another thing we thought would be useful is to discuss as a community what reflective practice might look like for different kinds of proposals, and think about what routes there could be for recording and sharing it. That term reflective practice is not familiar to everyone. It just means reflecting on the way that you work and how you do the things that you do in your proposal. And it's useful to be able to share it because it can be really helpful to other proposals that come along after you who are trying to work on similar things. It often means a focus on what you've learnt rather than what your outputs are. And finally, an insight from the survey is that we need to be aware as a community in all of this that one size doesn't fit all. Different types of proposals need to do things differently, and we saw this really clearly in the responses we got to the survey, where people were doing their monitoring in really different ways depending on what kind of proposal they were working on. So if you'd like to see the full external survey analysis, you can see our closeout report, and there are some other useful links in there. Thank you very much for watching.